to check us out. That's Facebook.com/The Show. Again, Facebook.com/The Show, and watch the simulcast of the show, which usually is at WatchDA.com every day, but today we've shifted it over to Facebook.com/The Show. Joining us is college basketball insider Gary Parrish, now that we have our Final Four team set. Gary, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing good, buddy. How you doing?
Everything's all right. You know, a little overwhelmed like everybody else who covers this sport for a living, but the end is in sight.
Duke, Kansas yesterday was an instant classic, but we never thought that Kansas would do it with this team. They've had much more talented teams in the past. Why was this one specifically equipped to go to the Final Four for Bill Self?
Well, Bill is somebody who puts together a team that's capable of this literally every year. It doesn't always get there. It's the nature of a single elimination tournament.
Gary Parrish with us here on CBS Sports Radio. Why don't we try to get him to a better cell phone area? I believe it sounds like Gary Parrish needs a little bit of time.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So, Gary, you were saying every year Bill Self builds a team that can do this.
Yeah, so the nature of a single elimination tournament, it prevents it from happening sometimes, but they're always capable. And obviously on this selection Sunday, even though, I agree with you and most people who say that this Kansas team wasn't the most talented Kansas team, not even one of Bill Self's best Kansas teams, it was clearly capable of doing this. And so why did they get there? Because Grayson Allen's shot didn't go down at the end of regulation. Sometimes it really does come down to that.
Grayson Allen had a tough game yesterday. Do you think that he took on too much of a role in that game and at times shot Duke out of a win there? I mean, that shot almost went down to the end of regulation, but he was not having a good shooting day overall yesterday.
Yeah, I've seen him, get in that mindset and actually be brilliant. The game early in the season against Michigan State in Chicago, when I think he got 37 points, he had the same mindset. On that night, the shots went in. Yesterday, the shots didn't go in. I really didn't like the final possession in regulation because it was so clear that he wasn't letting go of that ball. He was going to take a good shot or a bad shot, but he was definitely going to take a shot to try to win the game. And when you are on the court with, for the most part, 4 other pros at all times, I don't know that's the way that final possession should have gone down. But again, if he makes the shot, and he almost made the shot, it hit the rim I think 4 different times, then we're discussing him as as somebody who took control of a game in the final seconds and was determined to push his team into the Final Four. It just bounced the wrong way on him. So here we are.
As you alluded to, Bill Self's Kansas teams have the talent to go to the Final Four every year, but it's through luck of the draw, and also Final Fours and eliminations in one-game elimination tournaments are very difficult. Do you think that there's something that Bill Self has to own about why so many talented teams did not get this far for his Kansas squads?
It is certainly part of his resume, and it was interesting leading up to the Duke game. The day before in press conferences, he brought up the fact that he had lost, 7 times in the Elite Eight. And it wasn't a question directed at him about that. He brought it up, which seemed to suggest that it was on his mind. And, when you watched him celebrate yesterday at the buzzer, his emotions, visible emotions, were more than even when Jay Wright won the national championship 2 years ago. It seemed, like a happy moment, but also a sense of relief, because he didn't have to walk into a room and once again answer questions about why his team that was favored, at least on the seed line, because I know at tip-off they actually were underdogs in Vegas. But on the seed line, his team that was supposed to get to a Final Four didn't get to a Final Four. I ultimately have always chalked this up to nature of the tournament. People forget that, before Billy Donovan won his first of 2 national championships, he was eliminated in the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament 5 consecutive years. And people started asking big questions about Billy. Okay, he can recruit all these guys and have nice regular seasons, but in the tournament he can't get it done. People are now saying that about Tony Bennett. They're now saying it about Sean Miller. I've always believed this. If you continue to build nice rosters and good teams and put yourself into that field with an advantageous seed, it happens for you. Sometimes it doesn't, but eventually it will. And yesterday was an example where the ball just bounced Bill Self's way. Sometimes it hasn't, but it did yesterday. And I think it's far more important as a coach, rather than just get lucky in the tournament, just continue to put yourself in a good position to be great in that tournament. And literally nobody does that more often than Bill Self.
Gary Parrish, CBS Sports, joins us here on the show. He oftentimes fills in for me right here on these airwaves, CBS Sports Radio. Is this Villanova team actually better than the one that won the national championship?
There's a lot of metrics that say that it is. And, I know that they weren't Big East regular season champs, but that really comes down to a Phil Booth injury more than anything about the quality of their basketball team. The team that won the Big East this season, Xavier, Villanova ran off the court twice. This Villanova team would have entered Selection Sunday number one in the AP poll and Big East champions as the number one overall seed if they had just stayed healthy. They didn't, so they took some losses that I think maybe altered the perception of what that team is. But it's clearly, according to most computers, the best team in the country and has been right there in that conversation for much of this season. And I thought yesterday was an awesome example of why. They didn't play well. Jalen Brunson didn't play well. Mikal Bridges didn't play well. They didn't shoot it well. They turned it over too much. And they still won by double digits. They still beat a good Texas Tech team by double digits. If you go back to their first loss of the season, and I always thought this was important, Butler shot above 50% from three-point range and barely beat them. Like, if you're going to shoot above 50% from three-point range and take as many threes as Butler took in that game, you should win that by 15, 20 points. It wasn't like that at all. It was a game still up for grabs in the final 4 minutes, in the final 2 minutes. And so I always thought, people said, oh, they lost to an unranked team. I always thought that was impressive, that you took that kind of shooting barrage from another team on the road in a hostile environment and still had a chance to win the game. They are the favorite right now to win the national championship, and they probably should be.
It's a really good point. On Michigan, we tend to sometimes look too far into something and try to extrapolate it, but it's impossible to ignore the fact that Michigan, as the rest of the Big Ten, had that full week off before the tournament began because they moved back their conference tournament. Michigan came out looking fresh and springy and bouncy throughout this tournament, and they've kind of rolled into the Final Four. Do you think that helped them?
I don't think it hurt them, which was the conversation leading up to, this NCAA tournament. How will the week off affect, a Michigan team that was obviously playing well, heading into the, as the regular season and Big Ten tournament unfolded. And I consistently said, I don't think it'll affect them positively or negatively. People, often look at, schools that have a week off before the NCAA tournament and they say, hey, they rarely get to the Final Four. But that's not because they're not good enough or because it is because they're not good enough. It's not because of the week off. It's because typically the leagues that play a week early, are mid-major leagues. So those teams just don't get to the Final Four because those teams just don't get to the Final Four. I said that if any Big Ten team lost early, people would point to that. And if any Big Ten team went to the Final Four, people would point it out as maybe even an advantage. I think really it didn't hurt them, but I don't know that it helped them. It's just that they were quality. They're a very good team and have been that way for a month, and so here they are. I don't make much of that one way or the other.
Finally, Loyola of Chicago has had this amazing Cinderella story, but they wouldn't have probably gotten an at-large bid unless they won their tournament, and now here we sit in the Final Four. Do you think this will open up any selection committee members' minds the next time around we have a mid-major like Loyola of Chicago knocking on the door but didn't get the automatic bid?
I hope so, but I doubt it. And the reason is because they have very, stated guidelines that they follow. They look at numbers. They rely on quadrant one wins / quality wins more than they rely on anything else. And if you play in a league like the current version of the MVC, you're just not going to have opportunities to get those. And so I think that gap, to the extent that there's a gap, it's widening more than it is closing. There is a lot of data that suggests the so-called mid-majors aren't getting a fair shake on Selection Sunday when it comes to at-large bids. Now, some of that is because some of the teams that used to be mid-majors aren't anymore. Once upon a time, Butler was a mid-major. Now it's a Big East school. Once upon a time, Wichita State was a mid-major. Now it's an American Athletic Conference school, top 7 league in the country. So some of the shift is rooted in the schools that are traditional powers at that level are no longer at that level. But I do wish that the committee would recognize excellence, because Loyola Chicago is a surprise Final Four team, but they're a top 30 team in the country and have been for much of this season. They've only lost once since January 3rd, and that was a 2-point loss on the road. So they've been good for a while. They won in the regular season at Florida. You can't do that unless you're good. And so while it is surprising that they are here as an 11 seed, clearly their seed doesn't correlate with the quality of that basketball team.
Gary Parrish, CBS Sports College Basketball Insider. Follow him for the latest on the Final Four. It's a busy time of year for him at Gary Parrish CBS, and he's all over it on Twitter and, of course, all over the place on the CBS Sports channels. Always good to get you up, buddy. Thanks so much, man. Keep up the great work.
Thanks for saying that. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Gary Parrish joining us this morning on the show. When we come back, we have got the cut line, the stories that did not make the cut, plus your epic fail.